All right. Happy holidays, everyone. I hope everyone is staying warm and enjoying the warmth of your families. Um, this is Dr. R, and I have not done one of these for a couple of weeks. I've been working on some stuff that I'm going to talk about today. Today, let's just get straight into it, right? I am going to speak about something that I believe is going to make a massive difference in your life. Um, I know that sounds like a sales pitch, but I'm not selling anything. This is something that I've discovered and that I want to share with everyone because I'm finding it helpful for me right now. And you know how, like, you come up with ideas sometimes. You ever come up with an idea for a product or some kind of a service, something that's going to change the world? And then you discover that, yeah, it's old hat. Everyone knows about it. It's an old idea. And maybe it hasn't been promoted enough, or, it's not out there in the ether enough, and it should be. So I have one of these things. There's something I discovered, but I'm sure it exists. I'm sure if I would look that I would find that it exists. But that does not take away at all, I don't think, from the importance of it. So let's get into it. I am going to tell the story of what I'm discussing. I'm going to tell it at the beginning, at least, as a story before we get into the meat. Please indulge me. Um, I just think it's more interesting that way. And hopefully, you're listening to this in your car, or you're listening to this while you're cleaning, or you have a little time, and just go ahead and breathe into it and get the tension out of your shoulders. Because sometimes while waiting for someone to get to the point, that can be anxiety producing and it can cause a lot of tension, and you might feel it in your chest or the pit of your stomach. And that's actually how my story begins. Because last week, or a couple of weeks ago, actually, I was speaking to my friend Cornbread. And he's a buddy of mine, not his real name. His parents did not name him Cornbread, thank God. But his name is Brad. And for various reasons, I began calling him Cornbread years ago. And we're talking on the phone. And Cornbread has this unfortunate habit, which is that he rambles and he speaks for a long time. And he's doing this, and I know him. I've been through this before with him. But while we're on the phone, I start doing other tasks. I'm like, okay, he takes him a while to express himself, so I'm just going to do some stuff on the computer, maybe organize a little bit, and I'm doing this. And then I try to focus back on it, and then I notice that I'm feeling really anxious. I'm like, when you want to just say to someone, get to the effing point already. All right, land the plane, bring it home. And that's where I was with him. And then I took a step back and I said, okay, what is going on here? Why all the anxiety? And this is what I realized. What I realized was that he kept opening up new threads of conversation. Instead of staying on one coherent narrative path, he kept getting into other things, going off on tangents. And that was creating anxiety in me because he kept opening these things and not closing them. And my mind was like, okay, well, what happened with this thing? You need to finish that. I need to know that before I could go on. And what I realized was that he kept opening these loops. His need was to just yammer on and say the things that were in his head. And my need was for resolution. And that's what was creating anxiety in me. And I started thinking about it. And I started thinking about all the conversations that I have with people and how that happens and how there are different styles. And now Cornbread and I are able to overcome our differences in styles because we really like each other and we have history, but it's maddening. And I know it makes his wife crazy too. And he's not the only one who does this, obviously. We all know a ton of people like this. But then there are other people who like are the opposite. In other words, we have different needs, right? I need resolution. I need something called salience. What is salience? Salience is about priorities. I need the high priority information. I'm waiting for that end. I'm waiting for the loop to close. And that's what causes the anxiety. And I started thinking about this and I kind of wrote something up like, hey, this would be great for communication. I'm not in that field. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not an organizational psychologist. I'm not in human resources, but this could have applications for hiring and it could have applications for matchmaking. Because what I realized was that there are different styles, right? There are people who are slow loop openers. And they're generally fast loop closers, right? You mention a subject and that opens up that loop and then you resolve it quickly. Hey, the other day I went to the movies, right? And I saw such and such a movie, right? You open the loop, you close it. Other people are like, yeah, I went to the movies the other day and I don't know. I wasn't even sure I wanted to go to the movies. I was really thinking about going out to dinner instead. But then my friend Carol called me and she said, "Oh my God, I just spoke to Joe that we went to high school with." And then I thought, you know what? I'd rather hear about Joe than go to dinner or go to the you see what I'm doing here? Like this is a person who's opening a lot of threads and just going with them. In the meantime, I'm like, well, what happened? Like, get to the point. And sometimes you will hear that expressed in frustration. People will be like, please, my God, get to the point. But the person who's exploring, who's a slow loop closer and a fast loop opener, they're thinking something different. They have a different need. And this goes to compatibility, right? And this is in the realm of communication. And that in and of itself was eye-opening for me. And I kind of wrote up a thing and I sent it to a couple of people I know who are psychologists. Maybe you could use it. And then it dawned on me also that this has applications for just life, because that's the realm of communication. But then there's the realm of action. Then there's the realm of doing things. I know people in my life who can do a lot and they accomplish a lot. And they're obsessive about it, right? They're closing loops all the time. And then there are other people, if you look around them, they have a million uncompleted cycles, right? We often call these cycles. And, they're opening cycles and they're not closing them. And believe it or not, this is the architecture. This is how people function. This is the architecture of life. Loop architecture is the architecture of life. It's the spine. And it's the architecture of success or failure or overwhelm. We're at a time of year where a lot of people are overwhelmed, right? There's a lot of loops and they're open and they're unclosed. And the problem with unclosed loops is manifold. First of all, when you have unclosed loops, some part of you has attention on that. And that creates anxiety. But here's the thing, and it's one of the keys. An unclosed loop for certain people is a threat. It's danger. It's a threat to survival. As odd as that sounds, and think about it, you may be this kind of person, you may know this kind of person, but it makes them crazy if they have things that are unfinished, are unresolved, because somehow deep within them, they are interpreting that as a threat. Now, to what degree that's a threat in their lives is a different question, right? Sometimes, like an open loop is inherently threatening, depending on what the open loop is. You know, you have cancer. Well, you want to get that resolved. That's a big open loop, right? That's a high priority open loop. But sometimes it's not. But an individual, because of their operating system, might not be able to distinguish. I'm more on that end. And there are other people who don't interpret things that way. They're less sensitive when it comes to loops, even if they are high priority loops. And I am making no statement now about what the better way to be is. The better way to be is the way that makes you fulfilled and happy and allows you to accomplish things in your life. And it doesn't destroy you. It doesn't bring you down. But this kind of loop architecture, that's actually at some level threat architecture, this is our fundamental operating system. And to the degree that we can understand this and we can get a better understanding of ourselves and our own styles regarding this, that's the degree to which we are going to do better in every realm of life. Now, I may or may not bring this back to weight loss or health. I mean, health as in physical health, right? And because what we're talking about now seems very much like the architecture of mental and emotional health. And there's no doubt that this is at the foundation of it. It's not the only thing, clearly, but it's how we work at some level. And so this is why I'm suggesting that this is super important to understand. If we understand this, we can have some control over it. Maybe not complete control. Our operating systems have been forming for a long time, and it's hard to unstick them. But there's a possibility, at least, if you realize what your relationship is with these unfinished cycles, these threads that are just sticking out there, and how they function as threats, and they function to take your attention, and they function to make you not want to open up any more loops. I wish I could ask for a show of hands right now. You know, how many of you don't have the bandwidth to start one more thing? You can't hear one more thing. You don't even want to accept a phone call because it will be one more thing, right? So internally, we know that when we have all these open loops, when we have this accumulation of threats, we're not opening anymore. And that's not even a personality thing. That's not a character thing. That is simply structural. That is simply your body or your mind or whatever combination, your spirit is saying, I can't handle anymore. I know that this is going to lead to a collapse. It's like piling things on. But just knowing this gives us some insight. And maybe the insight is anytime you feel overwhelmed, you look around and you say, okay, what are the unclosed loops and how am I interpreting them? How are they actual dangers to me? And can I do something to close them? And if I do, will I then feel freed up to the point where maybe I could take on some more, where I could take on some more of the demands of life, or do something else that's pleasurable, as opposed to just be in this cycle of, thinking about what's undone or thinking about I can't endure one more thing. I have personally found this very helpful. I have been dealing with tech issues. If you've listened to me before, you have heard me complain about tech issues. It makes me crazy. It's probably the number one barrier to my business, for example. My staff used to laugh because they would hear me growling and threatening the computer that I was going to put my fist through it. I have had tech issues on and on. Like, it's a nonstop thing, and many of you can relate to this. There are many mornings when I walk into the office and the first thing I have to do is spend 40 minutes signing into things or handling any tech issue that comes up. Now, how do we fix tech issues? Well, we usually find more tech to fix tech issues, right? So we add more loops. I hired a team of people to do what they call integrations, to get different software to work together. I hired this team. They spent months. It was expensive. And at the end of that time, there was nothing better. Nothing was improved. And this is a known thing in the tech world, by the way. It's a known thing that, you solve tech with more tech and you're going to just create more complexity. And this is why many of us turn away from tech. And we don't want to deal with it. And this creates more open loops, right? So it's obviously this vicious cycle. But in having this understanding now, there's something that I've been taking care of on my own with the help of AI, right? So I've been having these issues with emails and sending them out to clients, and I've been doing this now over 2 days for probably 8 hours. And it's the same kind of thing that I would not have even attempted to confront before. I'd say, screw it. No one's ever going to get an email again. It's just not worth the time because it was too overwhelming. It was too much of a threat to me. But I've been doing it. I've been plugging away. And my thought process now is, it's not a threat. It's an unclosed loop. And we're trying to close it. And what you discover when you start to think about your own operating system, your own architecture in this way, is that there are different size loops. There are different lengths of loops. You could have one that's a lifelong loop that you're dealing with, right? But let's just stick to this instance, right? Within any project, right? We'll call a particular project a long loop. There's going to be many short loops that comprise that longer loop, right? And that's what's happening now with the fixing the emails. So the idea is always to break things down into loops where you can get immediate closures. And you stack those wins on top of each other. Closing a loop is a win because it gets it out of your consciousness, right? And it addresses something that, is often in the real world, or it's working towards something, right? So the degree to which you could break down the large loops into the smaller handleable ones, right? Where you can actually do something that ends that particular cycle quickly without it being overwhelming, right? To that degree, you'll be able to close the longer loops, the ones that seem insurmountable. And that is loop architecture right there. And I've termed it the architecture of life. It's also the architecture, as I said before, of threat or danger. The world is probably not as dangerous as it seems when we have a lot of loops open. And if we could conceive of it that way, then we can become more functional. So I'm going to be speaking more about this because, like I said, I think it's fundamental. I think an understanding of it can really bring about good, positive change, whether that be at work, at home, just handling things. If you don't feel yourself, and somehow, okay, what kind of loop can I close? What kind of quick win can I get? And now let's pivot this over to our weight, right? Weight loss, my core competency here, something that I've been failing with myself of late. So if we take this view on and we look at the loops that involve that too can seem overwhelming, right? But what are the loops that we can handle? Can we handle for 3 days of limiting carbohydrates? Yeah. Can we handle closing a loop that is causing us anxiety and maybe contributing to us wanting to eat? What is pending at work, for example, that we know we need to have done? And if it's a long thing, right? If it's a long-term project, okay, good. What are 2 or 3 short loops that can be handled right now or in the immediate future that is going to alleviate some of that anxiety where I'm less likely to want to eat bad things? This is how I want to encourage you to start thinking. Because if we can master this, then we can be okay. Now, bear in mind, there are some people, I'm speaking of a particular problem, right? I'm speaking of people who have too many open. There are people who know this intuitively. And some of them we might consider anxious or neurotic. And they're the kind of people who will stay up all night doing something because they can't even fathom the idea of not doing it and it being out there and just pecking at their consciousness, right? And maybe that's not the way to be either. Maybe the solution is actually twofold. It's closing the loops that you can, but also desensitizing yourself to the perceived danger of them, so you don't find yourself nuts. And I got to tell you, we have all kinds of pathological terms for people who do this, right? ADD, obsessive compulsive disorder. I think what we'll find is at the bottom of this is a relationship with loops, with cycles, closed and unclosed, and the priority and the importance of closing them, and the number of them that are closed and open, and all of these different ways to look at it. And this is not to say, by the way, that there's not a neurological or physiological component. I'm making no comment about that. What I'm talking about is I'm talking about the actual mechanics of the behavior. I'm talking about the architecture of it, how it exists in the real world, not where it's coming from. Now, does the possibility exist that someone who can develop a good understanding and relationship with this type of loop architecture can improve on those things that are believed to be pathological? Yeah, I think that's a possibility. I don't know that for sure. It's not my field. It's why I sent this to a couple of psychologists. I don't care about that. I'm looking now for results. I'm looking for results for myself. I'm looking for results for my clients, anyone who's listening to me. If this could be of benefit, if you could take it on and use it, that's what I want. I'm not performing double-blind studies here, and I'm not doing research into the brain. All right. As I said, we're going to talk about it more. Let me tell you another way that this relates to weight loss. Because I was unable to close some of my earlier loops, and because I had these tech issues, my communication about Black Friday was underwhelming. There are probably still clients who don't know that I was doing a huge promo. So guess what? The promo is continuing. Okay, the Black Friday sale is ongoing. And I will fix this email issue and I will be able to contact more people. And I will communicate exactly that to them. And I'll probably also send an email once it's fixed. It's still not there. It's still not there. I've probably closed at this point 80 to 90% of the short loops. It's been about 8 hours of mind-numbing work. Things that are unintelligible to human beings. But it's happening. And I decided not to farm it out. because what they would charge is just absurd. So I'm handling that. You will be informed. The communication will return and it will be on a higher level. And now we have this blessing of this new understanding in a season of blessings. So I invite you to look at things. I invite you to look at your own operating systems with this understanding. These are the bricks in the mortar. This is what's going on at some level that you've probably never looked into very deeply. And the idea is not to look so deeply that you get lost. But the idea is to develop some understanding, to use these understandings for your benefit. So that is it for today. We are in early December. The holiday season is well underway. I hope it is joyous for everyone, and everyone should enjoy it. And if there's anything you need, please feel free to reach out. All right. I will be speaking to you next week. Take care.